Hi everybody, this is my presentation for EDL 850 of my case study. I apologize, Screencast-O-Matic and I don't get along. The first category is problem identification and analysis. So first I'm just going to briefly review what we know about this case. So this case takes place at Slattery-Steno High School, which is in an affluent neighborhood of a large city. The parents there are very concerned and involved. Dr. Smith is the principal at Slattery-Steno High School, and he's very experienced and well respected. Miss Tate is a second-year science teacher. She teaches a lot of very rigorous courses, and she has very high expectations for her students. Dr. Smith has actually received a lot of complaints from parents and students about her expectations, and he's actually made some recommendations of changes that she could make to help have better relationships with students and their families, but she has up to this point not taken those recommendations into account. One Sunday, Miss Tate received an email with a link to a Facebook page where there was a lot of harassing and explicit comments about her, both personally and professionally. She reported this page to Dr. Smith, and at the end of the page was a message that she considered to be a threat to her safety and to her life, which was a comment about making Miss Tate disappear. Dr. Smith persuaded Miss Tate not to call 911 and not to report to the police, as he viewed this as a prank rather than a death threat. However, Miss Tate was still really concerned about it, and she accused William Hall of creating the Facebook page. William Hall has been a disruptive student in her classroom and has also had a lot of experience with computers, so she believes that he's capable of making this page. And Dr. Smith promised to investigate the issue further the next day. Next we need to talk about what we need to know. So these are some questions that I had concerning this case. So I wanted to know, would this case be considered libel? What does the district policy have to say about this? What do state laws have to say about it as well? About bullying, cyberbullying, libel, threats, all those things are relevant to this case. We also need to figure out who created this website. Obviously, that's kind of the key question in this case. And then finally, can the district technology officer trace who did create this webpage? Which brings us to the problem. So the problem here is that Miss Tate feels that she has been defamed and threatened by a Facebook page, which was possibly created by one of her students. So Dr. Smith, or the administrator in this case, being me, I suppose, needs to determine whether this issue falls under his school jurisdiction and whether he is going to investigate the matter. If he is going to investigate the matter, he needs to find out who created this website, and then he needs to decide if there's going to be any consequences for this student at school. And then finally, Dr. Smith, or any other administrator in this case, needs to find a solution to this case that allows student learning to continue in the school. The second category is going to be my proposed plan of action for what I would do if I were the principal at Slattery-Steno High. So the first thing I would try to figure out is this a school issue? So the first thing I would do is consult relevant laws. So I looked at the Kansas laws regarding bullying and cyberbullying, and I determined that this definitely meets the definition of both. It's harmful. It's done by one student to a teacher, or likely a student to a teacher. And so I think it's definitely meeting the definition of bullying. Under Kansas law, all school districts are supposed to have bullying policies, so there should also be an accompanying district policy regarding bullying. So then that would bring me to consulting district policy. So does the district have a policy concerning cyberbullying? And will the district take on matters that have happened off campus? I know that for the school district that I work at, cyberbullying is really hard to punish students for in school because the district refuses to take on anything that happened off school grounds as an in-school issue. So if this school district also has a similar policy, then Dr. Smith's hands are kind of tied as far as punishing this. And then I would decide whether to take on the case or allow it to be dealt with law enforcement. And I decided that I would kind of walk a middle ground here. I would actually report this to law enforcement. I think Dr. Smith was wrong not to, because there is a threat involved here, and I agree it's very likely a prank. However, you would hate for something to happen to one of your staff members because you assume something was a prank. So I think it's better to be safe than sorry in this case. But I would also question students at school to see, does anyone know who created this page? Because this is the only way that education is going to be able to continue in this school building. Issues like these often erupt and are very distracting and disruptive to school environments because it seems like everybody finds out about it immediately. And that's not a good learning environment for any of the other students. So I would want to look at, this case because in order for learning to continue, the case needs to be dealt with. The next step would be to find out whoever did this. So I would first ask students. So I would either call students into my office privately or make a generalized announcement about cyberbullying, the dangers of cyberbullying, and encourage any students to report any information about cyberbullying that they knew. I would not share any details with students because I don't want to violate any privacy of Miss Tate, and I also don't want this issue to become even bigger. And then I would individually speak with any students about information that they may have if they have any. Then I would consult the district technology specialist. I would want to find out, can this be traced? Hopefully it would be able to be traced and we would be able to easily identify who created the website. All district provided technology should be easy to search because most districts have policy on anything that belongs to their district can be searched at any time. But a warrant or at least permission from the parents would be needed in order to search private student personal property. And then finally, I would interview William Hall and any other suspects that were generated by the first two strategies. So I would want to interview William respectfully. You don't want to say, you created this Facebook page. We're not in an interrogation here. I would also alert his parents to this accusation and try to involve them in the investigation to see if they could be of any help. And I would invite them to participate in the interview and be with William, especially if law enforcement were there, which would be legally required. And then finally, consequences and kind of actions moving forward. So first, if we found out who did this, then there could be school consequences like loss of privileges, detentions, in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions. All could be potential, but like I said, in my school district, there would be no in-school consequences unless this occurred on school grounds or was done using a school-provided device. And then the only consequence that I would say is an absolute must is moving the student to a different class to avoid future conflict with Miss Tate. The second thing would be any legal consequences. So law enforcement could choose to bring criminal charges in this case because of a threat. However, I doubt that that would happen because the perpetrator is likely a high school student. And I don't really necessarily think that there should be criminal charges in this case. And then Miss Tate could also file civil charges for defamation and also for the threat if she felt like she needed to. And then moving forward, I would work with Miss Tate in sort of a mentoring role and maybe even create like a formal mentoring role for new teachers to ensure that her expectations are fair so that we can kind of avoid this happening in the future. Miss Tate definitely did not ask for this to happen to her. Having high expectations for your student is not a reason for people to make death threats against you. However, maybe some positive action steps can be taken to prevent this in the future. And then I may need to suggest any policy changes. If the school district doesn't have a policy on bullying or cyberbullying, they may need to create one, which may become evident during this case. And then finally, if the case does blow up and it seems like the entire community knows about it, I would have to address it with the community in some way. Not sharing any details of the case, but saying, Slattery-Steno High School does not stand for cyberbullying. We want to respect the privacy of all those involved. However, we are taking this issue seriously. Some sort of blanket announcement like that usually serves a community well. The next category is resolving the issues and focusing on student success. So there are several issues that I wanted to talk about with regards to student well-being. So one, they shouldn't be facing unrealistic expectations from their teacher. Like I said, Miss Tate did not deserve this message in this Facebook page. However, I would still want to work with her just to talk about how can we better avoid this situation in the future. Students also shouldn't be interrogated, and they have rights, which I believe I preserved through this case by questioning William rather than interrogating him and involving his parents and the parents of any other students who I was going to question. And then finally, students should not be going to school in sort of a chaotic, tense environment. So this kind of speaks to the benefit of all the other students in the school who are not involved in this case. So I want to remove the students from Miss Tate's class because that just seems like a very tense situation for all the other students involved. And I don't think that they deserve to try to learn in that environment. And then making announcements regarding the case, like I talked about, just to kind of calm down the community, hopefully. And then talking to students and asking for their help and information, but not making students feel threatened in any way. So the ideal resolution here would be we would find out who created this web page, the student would be remorseful for their actions and give Miss Tate some sort of apology. But I think that they also should deserve some sort of consequence here, whether that be in school or outside of school through their parents, legal action, or civil court actions. Then the students would be removed from Miss Tate's class for their benefit, Miss Tate's benefit, and the benefit of all the other students. And then Miss Tate would hopefully feel like justice has been served here in some way through one of the consequences avenues that I've previously discussed. And then hopefully Miss Tate would agree to work together with myself or a mentor in the future to ensure this kind of situation doesn't arise again and to ensure her well-being and the well-being of her future students. Finally, any policy recommendations that needed to be made that would prevent this issue from happening in the future. Debriefing and reflecting. So first, these are things I was thinking about in this case. I was thinking about whether or not this was a school issue at all, which I've talked about a lot. I was thinking about ways to obtain information from students without violating any of their rights or sharing unnecessary details that would just make the situation worse. And then I was thinking about how could we prevent this in the future, whether it be policy changes, mentoring programs, working with Miss Tate, how can we keep this from happening ever again? I was also feeling a lot in this case, so I was feeling that this issue needed to be addressed. Even though it may not technically be a school-related issue, I feel like in order to maintain the education that's supposed to be happening in this building, this issue needed to be handled. I also feel bad for all the parties involved here. I especially feel bad for Miss Tate because she was threatened and harassed, but I also feel bad for the students because apparently they felt like this was the only way that they could be heard. I also feel that Dr. Smith and Miss Tate could have done more to prevent this. Like I said, obviously Miss Tate did not ask for this, she did not deserve it, but there could have been steps that could have possibly prevented this from happening. And then I also am thinking about the things that I value. I'm valuing the safety, rights, and education of my students, but I'm also valuing the safety and rights of my staff. I want Miss Tate to feel safe as well, just as I want all of the students to feel safe. And I'm also valuing the expertise of others who may help me with this case, like law enforcement officials and technology specialists. Unresolved issues. So there could be a lot of unresolved issues in this case. Obviously, if we never found out who did it, that would be a major unresolved issue. And then any civil action or legal action that Ms. Tate or law enforcement officials wanted to take against the creators of this website could also be continuing issues that I would have to deal with as a principal. Final category is Category 5, Reflection on Standard 5, which is an education leader at the building level applies knowledge that promotes the success of every student by acting with integrity, fairness, and in an ethical manner. So acting with integrity, I associated with as acting with morality. So in this, I wanted to be respectful and just do the right thing. So I was respecting all the parties in the situation and the emotions they were feeling, which I discussed on the previous slide. I would also do the right thing by working to create a better future outcome here to prevent this situation from ever happening again. And then finally, I would make sure that the guilty party faced some sort of consequences because I view this as a moral failure on their part, and so I think that they should face some sort of consequences for their action. I also wanted to be fair, which I associated with treating everybody kindly and making sure everybody had their rights protected. So I would act in the best interest of the entire community by working to solve this issue. As I've stated, no school can function when something crazy is going on, so we need to resolve this issue. It would also be most fair to Ms. Tate and to all of the students involved and the students who are not involved to remove those students from their class so that, again, education could continue here. And then it would also be beneficial to all the future students and staff members to create policy changes that protect them from cyberbullying if no such policies exist. Finally, acting with ethics. So I kind of viewed this as following policies and laws. So I would respect employee safety and privacy by not sharing additional information and by investigating this case. I would uphold student and parent rights when I was talking about how I would interview various students, not interrogating them, not bullying them, not pressuring them, and also involving their parents, especially if law enforcement were to be involved. So the references that I used for this case were just the Kansas legal statute on bullying and also my district policies to serve as kind of an example. Thank you so much for watching.